This video will look at how to create a new product in the system. So firstly we go to Merchant and then Products, and then on the right hand side we click Create. So the first thing we need to add is a name for the product. We can then give a basic text description for the product. We then have the option to also add an extended description, which can be using the editor, and we can either use the design view here. We can do things like make it bold, change the colors, or alternatively we can switch to source view and edit this description as HTML. So we then select a category for the product. And we have the option to enter in a Google Taxonomy ID. So if you're using our Google Shopping export, this could be of interest to you, because this will allow you to link it to a standardized category from Google's side. We can then add some additional categories to the product. And we can also select some related categories which can be displayed to the user when browsing the shop. We can then select a classification. So the classification system is a third level that the customers can use to filter the products when browsing the shop. So firstly they can look to filter by the manufacturer as well as a category, and in some scenarios your system may wish to use a third level, which is our classifications. So by default, if there's only one classification in the system, it will default to the general classification. And we can also optionally add in some additional classifications using the secondary classifications, just like with the categories. We can then set some accounting codes which are useful when integrating with a third-party accounting system. Then back to the top of the page, we then select a supplier, enter a supplier code, a supplier sell price in XGST, a supplier RRP, which is optional, and we can also optionally add a supplier rebate. So we actually have a report that you can run per supplier, which will calculate what your rebate should be per supplier. We can then select one or more manufacturers, and we can enter in a manufacturer code, which is optional. So we also have a field to support standardized codes such as UNSPC codes or EAN codes, which you can populate here. If you're using the contract service system, you have the option to select a contract service type which is attached to this product. So when someone purchases the product, a contract service of this type would be generated. If you're using the voucher system, you can select a voucher type. So again, if a customer purchases this product, they would generate a voucher of the type selected here, which they could then use to purchase product. We can then select any tax codes that are applicable to the product. The next section relates to the stock for the product. So by default, the product will inherit its settings from the supplier. However, we can override those settings per product. So we can either mark it as a dropship only product, which will just have a single stock level, or alternatively we can use the eMark warehouse management system, which will give you far greater control over the product. And in the scenario where there are multiple warehouses applicable to the customer, we have the option to select a preferred warehouse for the default stock levels. If we are using the dropship method for stock availability, then the supplier's stock count is where we would define the stock level. We also have the ability to set a stock low level, which if reached, rather than displaying the customer the actual stock level, we would display a generic message such as low stock. This is all dependent on whether your product template supports this feature. We can also set an ETA, which is displayed to the customer on the front end to indicate when the product will become available. We can set a specific packaging type as well as some different packaging metrics which can be displayed to the customer. We can also set the product weight, which is used for our freight matrix to calculate the freight. Moving down the page, we then have some SEO fields, so we can override the default page title, meta description and meta keywords. So by default, these will still be generated dynamically per product, and they will have the relevant information in there like the product's name and product code, but we do give you the option to override those, and if you wish to target some specific keywords or optimize that a little bit further. So we have the option to mark a product as active or inactive by toggling this checkbox here. We can also mark a product as deleted. So if you do attempt to delete a product from the search page, rather than physically removing it from the database instantly, the product will stay in a holding state inside the system for a period of 7 days. So what this means is if a product does get deleted accidentally by user error or a data feed issue, we can come back into the product and untick this flag so that we don't lose all that information about the product. Of course, once it reaches that 7-day grace period, it's then removed from the system. So we also have the option to make a product not publicly viewable by unticking this checkbox, which would override any access that the customer receives from access structures. So this is a little bit different to the isActive flag, because if we untick the isActive flag, then the product won't appear in the administrative product search unless we ask it to display inactive products. So by leaving it active and making it not viewable to the public, we still have full access to the product in the back end, but it just hides it from the customer. And then the last option we have on the page here is the update status. So this will define how products are updated by data feeds. So the first option, all details updated by the data feed, essentially hands over full control of the product record to the data feeds so that it can update anything that's in the product record. The second option will stop the data feed from overriding some of the core information like the display name and the description of the product. So this way you can still get your stock levels and pricing coming through from the feed, but it stops it from overriding any unfriendly product name or descriptions that might come through from the feed that you wish to override. And the third option removes the product from the data feed entirely, making the maintenance of the product entirely your responsibility to maintain. And once you're happy with all the details that you've entered, you would just click Save to create the product in the system.